This is Pamela Smythe from the University of Waterloo. I'm one of the hosts of Beyond the Bulletin, the podcast of internal communications at the university. We bring you news and views from the U-Waterloo community. Please spread the word that we're on SoundCloud.com or wherever you get your podcasts. And now the interview from episode 163 of Beyond the Bulletin, originally broadcast on November 24th, 2023. The Sustainability Office just launched the 2023 Environmental Sustainability Report. Released at the Eco Summit 2023, this annual report shows the progress the university is making towards its ambition to be a carbon-neutral campus and other sustainability goals. Matt Thijssen, Director of Sustainability, oversees the broad range of strategies and initiatives that will help us as a community make meaningful, positive changes for the planet. He tells us about what work is underway, what's completed, and what we still must address. Welcome back, Matt.
Thank you. I'm glad to be back. It's been a while.
It has been. It was actually episode 27. That was the last time you were here.
I looked at my calendar. It was December 2019, so I think a lot has changed since then.
You're right. A lot has happened, including the 2023 Sustainability Report. Now, before we get into the details of the report, let's talk about the urgency to being more sustainable.
I'll break it into two pieces, the way that I reflect on it. One of them is just the seriousness of which we're seeing things pan out across society. Lots of new, scientific understanding of where we are right now. It was the hottest July, August, September, and October on record. The last 8 years, the hottest 8 years on record. And just over the last few weeks, all sorts of interesting debates on, whether climate change of many issues is actually accelerating or whether it's linear. And that's not solved yet, but all of these kind of things panning out. But we're seeing it. I think this is the difference. It's not just a scientific debate anymore, but it's actually playing out in front of us.
Why does it matter whether we're being sustainable or whether we're improving?
Because I think we're a large contributor to the world. We're an exemplar out of almost the blue. Whether we see, flooding in Pakistan that put, I think the headline was a third of the country underwater at one point in time. We have Ontario in the U.S. blanketed with wildfire smoke this past summer. It really hits home when all of a sudden you wear a mask outside, not because of the pandemic, but because you're breathing in smoke when you're walking around. And there's parts of the world that have been dealing with this for a long time, but I think it feels a bit more real to us. And those are kind of the slap you in the face. You can't miss those because they're just so obvious. But I think one of the interesting things is a lot of people trying to draw connections to the stuff that maybe aren't so obvious to us. Things like the increase in food prices that we're seeing around the world being driven by, droughts or flooding or extreme heat that put pressure on a lot of our food systems. Even the commodities that we purchase, there was a really bad drought in Texas that destroyed a lot of the cotton crop. And so you have things like feminine hygiene products and diapers and medical supplies and all these things that are now just more expensive.
Do you think people get that their daily habits actually impact these global events?
I don't think so yet. And to be fair, when we look at an individual level, our impact as an individual is extremely small. But when we aggregate that across, 8 billion people or so across the planet, of course, that's huge. And so, yeah, it's getting to a point where I think people are understanding the urgency of the issue, or at least many people are. That's kind of like the nightmare fuel, right? All the scary stuff that's happening around the world. I think the opposite is also, changing too. The amount of action that's happening on the ground, whether that's policy. Last year, the United States passed the Inflation Reduction Act, which is one of the largest climate bills, in the world in history. And it's really transformed a lot of investments into low carbon technology. And, it's actually triggered policy shifts in all sorts of different countries in Europe and Canada and in parts of the developing world to kind of be competitive with this emerging technology that's happening. We have rapidly increasing, electric vehicle sales, renewable energy deployment, all of these things that are very good, maybe not as fast as we need them to go, but that momentum has shifted a lot. And then interestingly, in the higher education space, even just from when we connected last, now Times Higher Education, QS Stars, the two sort of prominent global rankings for the higher education industry now have sustainability rankings, rankings that touch at least partially on sustainability. And there's new networks and collaborations happening all the time across the higher education sector connected to sustainability. So yeah, a lot's happened, and some good, some scary.
Well, how are we doing? How is the University of Waterloo doing overall? In a word.
One word, okay.
One word.
I would say accelerating, in the idea that, we weren't standing still to begin with. There was already stuff that was underway, but to get where we want to go, we've got to go big.
Looking at the 2023 Sustainability Report, what are the biggest achievements reflected in it?
I think one of the biggest ones, and I'll keep going on that theme of acceleration and accelerating, is really ramping up some of the investments we're making into some of our energy and climate reduction efforts. So these are new projects that we're catalyzing that will, directly reduce energy consumption and emissions here on the campus. Plant operations, we're another interesting one that's more on a maintenance side, but the big smokestack that we have just behind Davis Center there, that's our, central plant, and it pumps out steam to all of the different buildings across sort of Ring Road and the center part of campus. And at every building, there's what's called a steam trap, which essentially helps recirculate some of the condensation and stuff that can build up in the steam pipes. And a lot of those need to be replaced. And by doing that, there's actually a pretty significant efficiency improvement, and it just makes, again, emissions and energy savings that come out of that. We're doing some cool projects to all of these things now being deployed in lots of different places, and again, we got to move even faster to reach these targets that we've set out.
Wow, these are some really inventive solutions. But I understand there's some places where we need improving. Like, we're, as simple as it is, we're not sorting our trash properly.
I'll maybe caveat two things. Waste is a pretty small percentage of our emissions, so it's not the biggest fish to fry kind of thing. And they naturally change up and down every year. The impacts of the pandemic, of course, there was all sorts of disruptions, people moving on and off campus, that the year-over-year change is a little hard to sort of pinpoint the actual trend. But I think your point on, we could be doing a lot better is a fair one. And so there's a lot that we've got to do to engage people to try and sort our waste better, to reduce it in the first place, to not, have disposable options everywhere for everything. When we go to waste receptacles across campus, if you peer inside any one of those today, you'll probably see a lot of the stuff is in the right bin and a lot of the stuff isn't in the right bin. And unfortunately, when too much is in the wrong bin, and I think since the last time we connected as well, we also have a new waste sorting app that the campus can use to actually figure out if you're not sure where it goes. We've improved the signage, but of course there's thousands of different items that people are dealing with every day. If you have no idea where it goes, consult the sorting app. It's on the sustainability website.
Besides the waste sorting, what is getting in the way of us reaching our goal?
I'll maybe look a little bit on the climate goal, because I think that's the largest one in terms of the amount of work that we have to do, and it's just a huge effort. And so I think that's the first barrier, is just the scale of what we have to think about. There's a ton of change that needs to happen. And I'm talking on campus, across society as well. Like, this is retrofitting buildings, this is replacing infrastructure, this is changing our power systems. I don't think that that's a, easy thing to navigate, and there's a lot to kind of unpack there. One of the things you hear across society is that it takes an all of society or an all of government approach to do these things well. Because if you have one department that's tasked with doing something and everybody else isn't on board, of course you're going to have lack of coordination or people rowing in different directions. I think the same is true at Waterloo, right? This takes an all of institution approach to move us towards these targets that we've set out. I think one of the other, really practical stuff that we're dealing with right now is sort of lingering impacts from the pandemic with the supply chain. We've all sorts of, price increases across the construction sector that are always challenging to manage. Like, some of the materials that we need are, it takes a long time for electrical equipment to arrive to the university, and for a while, like, you couldn't buy an electric vehicle because there was such a backlog of orders for them. So some of that's working out, some of it's getting better, and then some of that's just going to be chronic as we go through this rapid change where everybody now wants to buy EVs, or everybody's looking for heat pumps and other technology that we're going to be relying on in this kind of low carbon transition. Some really interesting and challenging pieces as well on as we electrify, which I think is going to be a big part of our decarbonization journey for the university. We're switching from gas in many cases to electricity. At the same time that in the province of Ontario, we're actually adding more gas to the generation of electricity. So it kind of works against us from a policy perspective. I'm hopeful that won't be as bad as some of the forecasts are, and that's a short-term thing, but it is it does make our job a lot more challenging, and we noted that in the report that, all other things being equal, making the change to an electric vehicle or an electric heat pump is much more beneficial when that's coming from clean power.
Those would be challenges that are facing every institution in the province.
Exactly. That's not at all unique to Waterloo. In fact, there's been municipalities, including many of our own here in Waterloo Region, that have actually reached out and said, hey, we, as communities, we're not going to be able to hit our climate targets unless we have a clean electricity grid that's going to be really the backbone of most of the work that we need to do across society. So there's the new sort of federal clean energy standard that's in development right now, a clean electricity standard, excuse me, that's, kind of trying to navigate how across Canada we set these out. And I think that actually bleeds in a little bit to the final challenge that I'll mention is this can be very highly politicized because these are, very big topics for us to grapple with. And unfortunately in politics, that usually turns into wedge issues that people will wield against each other for lots of different reasons. So that's certainly, maybe not so much in the university sector, but across society, it drives lots of the things that we're going to rely on, like incentives and funding programs from government and carbon pricing and all these things that determine how and when and where people make investments into clean technology. Unfortunately, when they're politicized, it means there's a lot of uncertainty around those things that would otherwise, be very, very helpful for us.
What is at stake if we don't meet our targets?
It depends on who we say we is. If we're talking about the University of Waterloo, this can be competitive advantage. If our peers are moving faster than us, they have a sort of storytelling that they can do in terms of attracting students, attracting employees who want to work at organizations that are being sustainable. There can be cost competitive advantages if you're moving from a system that is very dirty, and if carbon pricing continues in the future, that might be increasingly expensive. I think there's also sort of a technology risk that we have where you're stuck operating legacy systems long after those have been moved on. You don't want to be the last institution connected to natural gas when you're now shouldering the entire cost of the distribution infrastructure to get the gas to your campus or to your building somewhere else. So I think there's really big transitional risks if we're sort of staying behind, and I think that's a big motivation for us to really be active and not reactive to these things, but proactive in our planning. And on the flip side, I think there's all sorts of innovation opportunities for us to be doing really cool things. It's improving the quality of space, making more comfortable spaces, brighter, more inviting for people to work, study, live, research, etc. in. Improvements to air quality often come along with, better ventilation and air quality management inside buildings.
Are there financial penalties? Are we liable?
We do have regulatory requirements on certain things. So we have to have, for example, a recycling program that's been in place since the early 1990s. We have to have an energy management plan that's since the sort of mid-2010s. That's legislation that we have to comply with. But there's no penalties for not reducing our energy consumption by whatever we stipulate in those plans. Where we are seeing the financial, it's not a penalty, but just a cost, is in things like carbon pricing or when energy prices go up. Those are direct burdens to the campus.
Well, we've achieved 20 of the 27 objectives that were included in Waterloo's environmental sustainability strategy that was set out in 2017. That's pretty good.
So it's 20 that are either completed or mostly completed. So we're kind of on track to getting there. Some of the targets are for 2025. Things like carbon neutral and zero waste, those are over decades that we will be moving towards something like carbon neutral. Our goal is through 2050. But we do have interim targets that we're working towards in the meantime.
When you look at the expertise that we have on campus in the institutes, how well positioned is Waterloo to address sustainability challenges, not just for us or our campus, but broadly, our community, country, world?
I would make a claim that we're one of the leaders on this in terms of the amount of research expertise that we have on, we have Waterloo Institute for Sustainable Energy, the Water Institute, Waterloo Climate Institute, now Waterloo Institute for Sustainable Aeronautics. And these are kind of clustered under this Sustainable Futures research group that's now emerging under this broader sustainability theme. But yeah, I think we do really have some world-leading research expertise on these topics, and collaborations with other research collaborations and knowledge exchange collaborations with other groups around the world, plugged into different, networks, either research partnerships or even sort of public policy connections. This is not just all about technology deployment. It's also about how we, craft good policy. And so I think Waterloo has lots of strengths. And if I look across, even Waterloo Institute for Sustainable Energy, Climate Institute, and Water Institute, looking across these different areas, they've got expertise from all 6 faculties represented across there. Like, it's pretty widespread. It's not just Faculty of Environment, although lots of leadership there, but we have a really, I think, good breadth of expertise in different dimensions of sustainability. And that's sort of reflected in some of the rankings that we've seen over the past few years. Waterloo in the, depending on which one you're looking at, sort of around the 50th in the world for things like the Times Higher Education ranking. And a large portion of that is because of our research expertise, the amount of publications that we do on these sustainability themes, and a lot of the partnerships that we've built around these topics. So yeah, I would say I think that's definitely one of our strengths as an institution, is that knowledge base that we do have.
Well, the last time you were on, we talked about some of the initiatives that the Sustainability Office is overseeing. Some have changed a bit, but there are some new ones.
Yeah, we've got a ton of different programs, and I'll caveat all of these by saying, like, the Sustainability Office often helps with this, but they're usually done collaboratively with at least 1 or 2 other departments on campus, whether that's plant operations or campus housing, food services, and they deserve a lot of credit for moving these projects forward too. The free store is a neat one. Campus housing last year actually launched a move-in, move-out program where they essentially got students to donate any unwanted items in April as they were doing the major move-out, and then they gave them away for free to incoming students in September. And so housing, did an awesome job. We provided some funding support through the Sustainability Action Fund for it, but, their team really did the quite literal heavy lifting. What we're doing through the Sustainability Office is more of an ongoing, throughout the course of the year. You don't have to wait to move out to do that. And then, even for students who aren't in housing, if you have, old photo frames or, school supplies or something that you're not using anymore, it's a drop off and give it away for free environment rather than just, throwing it out.
Am I correct? There's a change to the Green Office, or is it the Sustainability Certificate?
Both. Yeah, we've expanded both programs. Green Office has been in place since 2016 now, and I think the number, I'll probably get it wrong, but it's close to 55 departments that are participating across the campus, and we have over 100 different ambassadors within those departments. The Sustainability Certificate is a training program that we run for employees through the Sustainability Office. Again, it's been going for several years. And what we've shifted recently was moving to more of a department-focused training. So a bit of a team-building exercise for, everybody from a particular department or those who are interested from a department to come together and take the training course, which is essentially 2 1.5-hour sessions.
Fantastic. What's next?
Lots. It's really funny, actually, when we do the sustainability certificate, people often say, like, what's the one thing I can do to be more sustainable? And I push back and I say, actually, what's the next thing you can do to be more sustainable? So in that same vein, I'll just say some of the things we have in the immediate term. We just actually hired a new staff person who's going to be expanding our Green Labs program. So it'll be sort of a similar structure to the Green Office program, but focus on lab spaces across campus, just given how energy intensive, material intensive, waste intensive, et cetera, that many of our labs are. Another neat thing that we'll be launching very shortly, and may have already launched by the time the podcast airs, is the Revolving Fund, which is essentially a pool of resources that folks on campus can tap into to take on projects that have a utility savings. So the idea will be, if you're doing a lab retrofit or a renovation project and there's something that you can do that would actually make the space or the equipment or whatever it is more energy intensive, the revolving fund could kick in some of the funding internally to make that happen. And one other thing that I think I'll be remiss if I don't plug is an ongoing curriculum project that we're sort of leading through the Teaching Innovation Incubator. Essentially, we have a working group of academic folks from all across the campus who are trying to navigate how do we integrate sustainability across the curriculum, not just in those programs where it's obvious. There's not going to be organizations that just get to ignore this or are unaffected by it. So how are we preparing our students for the set of skills and knowledge that they're going to need to succeed in this sort of future of work that's going to involve sustainability?
What haven't we talked about that we should be sure to share?
It's not just one department's role to tackle sustainability on campus. I mean, we have it in our title, but it really is something that will require everybody on campus to be tripping into. I just encourage everybody to actually read the sustainability report. We take a lot of time to put the information there together. I take a lot of pride in the transparency that we have as an institution with our reporting on sustainability, and we do that on purpose because I think it's, first of all, important to kind of build that accountability on the progress that we're making, but also it just raises, I think, the level of conversation because now we can have informed decision making with actual progress indicators and data, and we can all sort of speak a common language as to how we're doing and where we're seeing progress.
Well, we'll put a link to it in our show notes so people know where to find it.
And we'll be releasing sort of snapshots and stuff on social media and like key highlights and things as the report comes out. And I think that'll be a neat way to engage.
Thanks for all the important work that you do on campus.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to this interview from the Beyond the Bulletin podcast from the University of Waterloo. You will find our archive of full episodes on the University of Waterloo website. Select interviews are on the university's YouTube channel. Just look for our playlist there. Please join Brandon Sweet and me for new episodes. And don't forget to tell your Waterloo connections about us.